TCU is suddenly favorites over Texas Tech after a huge win in Salt Lake City over Utah this past weekend. We'll talk about it next year on Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. In the box next to me is Matt Jennings, freelance writer who covers TCU football. We're talking about the Frogs coming off a 13-7 win over Utah and facing Texas Tech this weekend. It's always funny. I'm guilty of this too. I'm saying this as someone who also suffers from the syndrome. I'm not peering down at the masses and being like, oh, look at you guys overreacting. But week to week, it's crazy how much things just shift. 2 weeks ago, everybody was flying off the handle. I mean, understandably so. And all my comments were like, we're not going to win another game. We might win one or two more games. This team is so bad. They go on the road. They defeat a backup QB and Isaac Wilson. I mean, they won the game. Like, it means something. They got it done. I was proud of the team for doing that. And now suddenly they are 6.5-point favorites against according to our friends at FanDuel, against a 5-2 Texas Tech team. Now, Tech admittedly doesn't have the most impressive resume in the world, but, I mean, I think if we're being brutally honest, TCU doesn't either with the wins that they put on the table this year. So it's kind of weird, but that's life in the big city. That's the twists and turns of the college football season. I'm going to get to that later on in the show. That's what we call in the business a tease. But right now, say that, Matt, that was weird. But right now, we're going to talk about what they did on the road against Utah. And Matt, I know that there were limitations with the Utah offense. Their offensive coordinator, Andy Ludwig, apparently reevaluated his life after getting shut down by the TCU defense and stepped away from being the offensive coordinator, stepped down. I think he was fired, but you guys get what I mean. That being said, what did you like about what you saw defensively from TCU? Because it did feel like fundamentally and just from an effort perspective, they were significantly improved on Saturday night.
I think the biggest compliment you can give them from the Utah game is they had opportunities against other one-dimensional offenses before this point in the season, and they weren't able to shut those teams down. And they did it this time, right? Like against UCF and against Houston, teams where it's like you knew that like what they wanted to do come in was running the ball, and that's kind of the only thing they were good at. And you really weren't able to stop it, even though you knew that's what you needed to do to win the game. They came out of a bye week against Utah and absolutely did that. I think it's different to your point. You're grading on a curve because Utah has apparently spent the last 3 years doing nothing, trying to recruit or develop the quarterback position behind Cam Rising. Mm-hmm. And you feel bad for Isaac Wilson that he gets kind of put in that scenario when they clearly haven't done enough to kind of get him ready. But you take the hand you're dealt. TCU took that hand and they got a winning and they won. They cashed in on it, right? And so that's something, again, they didn't do against UCF when they had a chance to and they gave up that big lead. They did do against Houston when they're facing another backup quarterback, mm-hmm. and they handled their business, right? And so I give them at least credit for that. I want to see what they can do against an offense that has even like a nominal amount of balance, right. But grading on that curve, they did what they were expected to do. They gave up one explosive play on the night and get on that 70-plus yard touchdown. Other than that, 4 sacks, total rushing or net rushing of 68 yards at 2.6 per carry average. Like, you feel good about all of that.
Mm-hmm. One of our listeners, Richard Berry, he made a good point in the comment section yesterday. He said the thing he was most impressed with was Utah really never had to get away from the run. Like, the way the game was going, they weren't in a position where they needed to change their offense. And going into the game, I was like, I just don't think they can slow down Mekhi Bernard enough to force Isaac Wilson into uncomfortable situations. But they did that. It leads me to another thought, though. I was happy to see this. I felt like Andy Avalos took more risk. He brought more blitzes. He stacked the box more. I don't know where that was against specifically Houston, but also in the UCF game. Do you think he just didn't have a lot of respect for the quarterback? Do you feel like this was maybe just having some extra time to prepare? I don't have a great feel for it because Utah's got a good offensive line, and so you would think this wouldn't be the week to take a lot of risk and leave your secondary exposed. But they did that, and they got home a lot, Matt. It was really an improvement there.
I do think that it was a matter of knowing the inexperience of the quarterback that you were facing, because Wilson, if he had some more experience and had a little bit more anticipation to his game, which he just doesn't have right now because he's been sitting behind Rising. There were opportunities to throw the ball downfield that he just missed out on, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that, to your point, I think that those were chances that Avalos was willing to take of saying, like, we'll leave some guys one-on-one in the back end because we don't have confidence that this quarterback's going to be able to punish us for doing that. And he was right for the most part, with the exception of that 171-yarder. He was rattled. He was unsettled. He was holding onto the ball. There was a couple of situations where he's trying to escape pressure and he's like turning his back to the defense. And like when that's happening, like, you know, like you're cooked as a quarterback. Like if your eyes are coming down, or if they're turning right 180 degrees from the line of scrimmage, like, you're done in terms of like trying to make something out of that pass concept. And so like that was good game planning. And it, again, they did what they were able to do and what they needed to do against this set of circumstances. I want to see what they can do against, say, a Baron Morton this weekend or a Sawyer Robinson the weekend after that. See if they can do anything even approaching that against a team that can keep you honest with the pass game a little bit. But with the situation you were given, you handled it beautifully. So well done.
Offensively, they did move the ball in the first half. Feels like the red zone has kind of regressed. I think part of that's the competition level. And again, just kind of being one-dimensional in what you can do, not being able to run the ball super well. But the second half was tough, Matt. And one random thought I had, I want to get your thoughts on the passing game in general and just why you feel like it sort of stalled out over the last few weeks. But I just see a lot of miscommunication on what I assume are these like post-snap kind of read and react choice routes where Josh Hoover thinks his guys are going one way, they go the other. There's a lot of pointing and talking to guys after the snap. So it doesn't feel like that should be happening with this frequency at this time of year. But why do you feel like they're struggling so much on an aspect of the game that was so prolific early on in the season and just getting yards through the air?
I think, how much time do you have? You know, like, it's like
we got all the time in the world.
It's one of those things where it's like it's never one thing. I made this point on Sunday night, and I was saying, I think that this team they desperately need some yak. They desperately need some yards after the catch, because you look at and again, like, it's morphed and changed over the years, but like the Bryles offense, like the classic version of it that we all remember from like the RG3 and Bryce Petty years at Baylor, it was predicated. It was known for its trademark was explosive plays. It was throwing vertically downfield and like also like breaking off like 40, 50-yard run plays like with regularity, right? It was scoring on big plays and scoring fast, like scoring drives of 40 seconds. Like that was a normal thing that happened all times, and they put up 60 points. And that was a very normal thing. But to do that, you need a quarterback and receivers who are going to a quarterback who's going to get the ball to fast receivers in stride who can accelerate and get separation from the defense. And TCU, the start of my point was I just don't know, like with the receiving core that they're putting out there, especially the guys who are in the rotation the most right now, Savion Williams, Jack Best, JP Richardson. None of those guys are like gonna get huge separation and then make a move in the open field and run and do a 70-yard catch and run. Like that's just not happening for them. Jack Best and Savion are tremendous hands guys, high point the ball guys, find open spots in the zone type players. But like once the ball's getting in their hands, they're not like, breaking off some big play. JP Richardson can do that kind of sometimes. But then the other part of it is that Josh Hoover's timing is not spectacular. He's making the right decisions, but he's like a quarter beat, a half beat late on a lot of them, so that he's not hitting guys in stride or he's throwing the ball behind them, and you have and then because you can't run the ball, the spacing and the leverage that these receivers are facing once they do get the ball in the secondary, you're not getting it with like you've got one man to beat and you're even with them. You're catching it and you've got one guy trailing you and you're heading into another guy in the zone and there's a safety deep because they don't have to respect the run game so they're not down low in the box, and it's just and then it's all these issues kind of compounding on each other. And I said it I said it as part of this conversation that we were having on Twitter. I was like, there's not an easy button. There's no easy button for TCU right now. Like everything is hard. The red zone stuff would not matter as much. Getting one touchdown in 5 red zone trips, which it must be said is what happened on Saturday. They got one touchdown in 5 trips into the red zone. That wouldn't matter as much as if they could break off a 40-yard touchdown run, if they could hit a 60-yard touchdown pass every once in a while. It takes the pressure off. But now it's like the only way you can get points is if you drive the full length of the field and then execute in the red zone. And guess what? They're not good at that. Like they hit these weird – and what's funny is that the numbers on the surface don't look like that, because if you look at the receiving numbers from Saturday, Eric McAllister had a long of 30 like in terms of like longest catches for each of the receivers. Eric McAllister had a long catch of 34. Richardson had 26. Jack Bech had a long catch of 30. Drake Dabney had a catch of 20, which was the touchdown. And it's like those numbers all look great, but like they're catching it at that point and they're getting like 3 yards afterwards. There's not they're not catching it and then breaking it and then and kind of breaking the will of the defense as they do it, right? And they have to get into that smaller range of the field where they're bad and then try and squeeze a touchdown out of it. And it's just, if they could just do something that's just like a pressure release for the offense, everything would flow a little bit easier, but they can't get that for all of the different reasons that are all conspiring together to make life difficult for them.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what they do against Tech, a team that struggled to both rush the passer and cover in the back end. And again, you talk about like this and, I mean, those things are typically correlated. And the red zone numbers were good until a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, defenses you're playing have something to do with that too. We will talk about a couple guys that might help with some of these problems next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Our friends at Roy are giving you, the fan, a chance to get directly involved in name, image, likeness from your couch. They've already pooled over $20,000 to support players on Roy. Roy stands for Return on You. Micro deposits lead to massive change. You can download the Roy app and directly support the athletes you love, ensuring that all funds go to the specific player you choose. This week, I'm supporting Savion Williams. I'd love you to join me. Even $10 makes a difference. Let's show Savion some love after a big week against Utah. Getting that key first down in the fourth quarter. You can create an account on the Roy app, and they're still giving away some great prizes. So 2 tickets to a game in November. If you download Roy, create an account, and enter the referral code Locked On, and you're entered. 2 tickets, to any game in November. Just use the code LOCKEDON when you create an account and download the Roy app today. Roy, it's a place where you can get directly involved in an IL. So I have been, not to take a victory lap, but that's what I'm doing. So I just said that before to give some fake humility to myself. I have been a Trent Battle truther for a while. And I like what he does. I like when he's been on the field. I said in the offseason I thought he could make an impact, and people were like, he hasn't really put up great stats. And I was like, listen, I'm telling you, he can do this. Well, Saturday night was my night. Trent Battle comes in. He gets a lot of snaps. He ran the ball well. He came in and was blocking well. He made a few catches out of the backfield too. So that was all fun to see. Another guy that was effective in the run game, Savion Williams, who has been good, at wide receiver, but really excelled in this kind of wild frog package. Had 72 yards rushing, which led the team. Battle had 8 carries for 45 yards. Matt, I know this is not – well, I mean, in the Trent Battle's case it is, but this is not the traditional run game you think of. But can these two guys in different ways give this team some more balance on that side of the ball, which they desperately need?
I think to a degree, I think it reminded me, and I said this on Saturday, it reminded me a little bit of, like, you remember the Jalen Reagor, like, the Sonny Cumbie's, like, let's make the whole plane out of Jalen Reagor plan against Oklahoma State back in 2018, right? Where it's like he was in the Wildcat, he was getting featured in the pass game. I think he had like a super long rushing touchdown in that game.
Yeah, he did.
If I remember correctly. And Savion's role was a little bit like be like the decision maker and the facilitator out of that wild frog. They've had him like run like option concepts. They've yet to like ask him to throw the ball out of that. But so far, like they've been effective with that. And I think if you can, what that does for you is do something that they just have zero of with Josh Hoover in at quarterback, which is like the threat of the quarterback run game, and really like even the ability to run option concepts, which is a separate rant that I can go on at a different point. But it allows you, the defense has to respect both the guy getting the snap as well as whoever's in the backfield with him, whether that's Battle, whether that's Cam Cook, whoever. And it's, I think the next question after that, Savion averaged over 10 yards a carry on Saturday doing that. The question is, okay, like this is the first time you really incorporated that into the game plan. You had an open date to prepare and add those wrinkles. Great. Are you going to add more wrinkles to that package or show more of them?
Yeah, because they ran one play on Saturday.
Right.
It was fake the pitch and then get outside on, basically like a toss sweep without the toss.
And he's up there doing that. And obviously Utah was not super well prepared for it, but now it's on film.
Right.
So how prepared for it is Texas Tech? How prepared for it is Baylor going to be, right? And so do you have counter punches off of that to use? And then there's also just the larger, like kind of like existential question with the offense. It's the same thing that we've been talking about with Haas Haney all year, where it's like, okay, bring in this special package on these certain plays, which is great. But then like, can you pass out of those packages at all? Which is a question. And then is it like, okay, are you tipping your hand even further that when Hoover's back there in the pistol or in the gun, you're just throwing it and you just, and so if you can show some additional wrinkles on top of it and both in terms of the run game and the pass game, just so they have to respect something and great. And if you can still be effective doing what you did on Saturday, now if there's film on and people can prep for it, if it's still effective, then awesome. That's great. So again, it's just like with the defense. I think I think you're excited about it and happy with the results. I think you're waiting to see now with different competition in the future, how sustainable is that? Because that's the the question that I have for the offense and kind of in a way the program as a whole is like, what are they doing now that is sustainable in terms of creating success? Because they need to find those answers because they haven't had a lot of them.
Well, and if you're going to use it as a package, I think that's fine. If you stick with what you're doing, you probably eventually corner yourself into a place where, and I'm not saying this is bad, like there's a place for this, but it's basically like short yardage stuff. So it's okay on 3rd and 2, 4th and 1. We know what we're doing. They know what we're doing. We have 2 or 3 things that we do out of this, and it's predicated on even if we don't block it up perfectly, the 6'5", 225-pound dude that's pretty good at picking through the line can at least like fall forward for a couple yards and move the chains.
Right.
And at its best, maybe you pop a big play or get out there in space and make something happen. Because what you're seeing with Haas right now is he comes in on 1st and 10 and they lose 4 yards, and now it's 2nd and 14. So now you're throwing your regular quarterback back out there. And it's like, why are we even doing this? What's the point? So yeah, they have to figure something out there. Going back to the defense for a second, Devin Deal, outstanding game. Marcel Brooks made some waves when he was out there. Former wide receiver Marcel Brooks. Bud Clark, hey Bud Clark, look at you, man! Interception, really good game. Any of those guys you want to touch on, Matt, or somebody else that stood out? Connor Lindgren, 75, came in and looked effective in some limited snaps. They threw a couple different dudes out there, and then you also had some vets who looked the part on Saturday night.
I think Brooks and Deal are the ones that certainly stand out to me. Brooks was making Wilson's life just miserable, especially early on in the game. And this is what we thought there was potential for early on in the season, right? Of when you can force the opposing team into obvious passing situations, and then you can get those that kind of pass rush specialist unit out there, then like you have the ability to do that. And then the blitz packages that Avalos likes to draw up, like you can see the vision there, but you have to get to 3rd and long. You have to get to 2nd and 12. You have to get to those downs and those situations first. Because the fact is, like, Brooks is a phenomenal pass rusher and a high motor guy. He's never on the field because they're never in a situation. They're always in 2nd and 4. They're always in 1st and 10 because they just can't stop the run. They stopped the run on Saturday, and so it's complementary football. They can play some complementary football, and then we'll be able to see more of the results from those players that we thought we were gonna get to see. I remember saying in week 1, like, oh man, they're gonna blow by the tackles for loss total from a year ago, and that was before we knew that they couldn't stop the run. If they can stop the run, then yeah, they do a great job in that regard.
Yeah, Brooks is just such a dog. I mean, like, he gets out there, and high motor is a great term for it. And it helps. Like, part of that is that he's playing limited snaps. And so it's tough for these tackles to keep up with him off the edge. But every time he's out there, I'm like, man, can we find a way to get him on the field more? And I know it goes back to what you said. It's about getting those situations in play. But that NASCAR package is fun to watch. We'll come back in our last, Matt, some big picture questions. We'll get a little existential on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Since I've been here for 4 long years, FanDuel's been rocking with us. FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. Frogs 6.5-point favorites against the Red Raiders at home this week. You can wager on that. You can wager on the over-under, which is 67.5. Or you can find more college football games, NFL games, Major League Baseball, the World Series, Dodgers, Yankees. It's so nice to see 2 small market teams duke it out in the World Series. That'll be fun, right? FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. Download it today. FanDuel, it's where the game starts. So, Matt, my question kind of coming into the show and really the last few days, and this is our last day on this, and then we're turning the page to Tech. But did the results Saturday change your mind about what this team can do? A win is a win is a win. It all means something. But moving forward, do you suddenly have more confidence that they can go on some sort of run here down the stretch?
I would have said yes if they had won the game on Saturday like 24-7. They won the game on Saturday like 27-10, right? Because you look at college football on the whole, you want to talk about like, I come back to this idea of like what's sustainable, like what is replicable, what can you rely on for success? And more often than not, beating teams, even bad teams, handily, like and kind of being in control of the game is more indicative of you being able to like be a quality team and produce at a high level long term than winning close games, right? And that was a perfect opportunity on Saturday for you to show like, hey, look, you've got a major mismatch against this team. You've got an athletic advantage against them. They're one-dimensional, and you've gotten plenty of scoring opportunities. Like Utah's defense is good, but they weren't able to keep you out of scoring territory for a lot of the night. You had a lot of chances. That was a game where you should have been able to not blow them out, but like get yourself a comfortable cushion to where when you give up that like 70-yarder in the fourth quarter, it's like, oh, well, that's nice, but it doesn't matter at this point in the game because the game is kind of put away. The hay is in the barn. Instead, they hit that one pass play after you've played a really pretty stellar game on defense, and suddenly you're like, are they going to lose this game? Because you can't separate. And so that's a long-winded way of saying, as of right now, my opinion on them hasn't really changed because I still think the problems on the offense are what they are, and the defense is not going to get the benefit of playing such a one-dimensional team every week. The good news for you, if you want to twist it another way, is these past two defenses that you faced in Houston and Utah are two of the tougher defenses that you're honestly going to play all year.
Yeah.
I don't think Tech or Baylor or Oklahoma State are going to, looking at teams that you're playing soon, are going to be able to like completely like shut down opposing offenses the way that Utah and Houston have been able to do at times this year. And so maybe your offense kind of returns a little bit to the shades of what you saw kind of earlier on in the season. So maybe you feel better. But like for me right now, it's really kind of painful watching this team try to score points. And that shouldn't be the case with all the talent that you have on that side of the ball.
When I look at each game individually, I think they could win all of them. I'm not saying they will. I don't think they will.
Yeah.
But the individual matchups are there. My hang-up is they overcame it Saturday. The mistakes are just still tough to overcome. And just frankly, like they don't have the type of talent to overcome the mental mistakes they're making week to week. Go ahead.
So I have two instances of that on Saturday, and I know you've talked about this already, but the two instances of that on Saturday that like are emblematic of this whole thing. First drive of the game, you march down the field with no problems, get right down into a goal-to-go scenario, try to run an option play with Josh Hoover. He fumbles for what I believe is like the fifth time this season, or loses a fumble for like the fifth time this season. I think he has more. And you give the ball to Utah and you come out of that first possession with no points. This is the first scenario. And I'm sitting here and I'm just thinking, look, Josh Hoover's clearly not comfortable with that. We've already talked about that. He does not know how to really execute at the mesh point of an option play. And we saw it happen against SMU. We saw it happen in this game. We've seen it happen multiple other times. He's not comfortable doing that or trying to pitch it out. He's not comfortable with it. And yet it is supposed to be like a foundational part of this Briles veer and shoot offense, is inverted veer, read option stuff. But if it's like, okay, we can't do that because our quarterback's limited, this is not a situation where it's like, well, we can't run these passing concepts because our quarterback doesn't have the arm strength, or we can't run this play because we don't have the athleticism for the lineman to pull and the way that they need to on this play. It's not an athleticism or a talent thing. Executing the option is a teachable skill. There are kids who do it at the high school level every week without a problem. And so that's the thing to me that when you talk about details, when you talk about mistakes, that's one thing that stands out to me of like, this is a fixable problem. This is not like this is existential. This is something that we just have to live with. This is not because it's a teachable skill. And I'll ask you a question. Is it the offensive coordinator's job? Is it the quarterback's coach's job to make sure that the quarterback knows how to run one of the foundational plays in your playbook? Because those two people are the same person, But okay, I know I like to make a big deal about Kendall Briles on it. So let me talk about someone else. That was the first situation. The second situation, I'm sorry.
It's fine. Let's go for it.
The second situation is late in the game, and you know where I'm going with this. You get to 3rd and 15, and you're having to sub late, even though you've had 2 weeks to prepare for this game after Houston pulled the late substitution, forcing delay of games and timeouts thing. They did that to you 2 weeks ago. You said after the game that we shouldn't have subbed as much. And then you come back after a bye week on the road, and you do it again, and you have to waste a timeout. And then you line up like you're going to go for it on 4th down, and you take another timeout, and then you just take the delay of game and you punt. And it's just like, you just burned 2 timeouts in the process for no reason. And it's just like, you were talking again. That's all. I'll bring it back to what you asked about, which was about like, or what you posed, which is the mistakes and the mental errors and the lack of attention to detail. And I'm just like, if you can't do like these, if you can't handle like these really what should be simple foundational things, then nothing's going to change. Because I keep coming back to this, and I know I sound like a broken record. You either need to have a big enough talent gap between you and everybody else that you play, where that can cover up for the places where you mess up. Mm-hmm. And guess what? You don't have that. So your other option is, okay, you can then you should execute at a high level and be disciplined and not make a ton of mistakes. And then you have the talent to win games. But instead, they're just good enough, they're just talented enough to where those mistakes don't make them get blown out, but they're not talented enough to where those mistakes don't matter. Because what happens on the margins in situational football in those key moments, it matters still, because you're not Alabama, because you're not Georgia, you're not Ohio State. You don't have the talent to just be like, well, we're just gonna run all over you over the course of the game, and it don't matter. It matters. The details matter, and they have yet to show an ability to fix the details, and it drives me insane, as you can tell. And
you seem chill about it.
That's part of why I'm out on them right now. I would like to not be out on them. Show me, TCU, that I don't need to be out on you right now. But this is where I'm at.
Yeah, at least you sound really fun and in a good place about it, for sure. The game management stuff is frustrating. I will say, like, that whole fiasco, and I ranted about it Saturday. That was a special version of it. That is one of my pet peeves in football in general, is coaches just don't – you have to know on 3rd down, what down and distance am I going to be comfortable going for it on 4th down? Because you see this all the time at every level. Somebody gets stuffed on 3rd and 2. Now it's 4th and 2. Then you spend 15 seconds, 20 seconds deciding whether you're not going to go for it. Then you spend another 10 seconds dialing a play call. Now you're breaking the huddle. You only got 5 seconds on the play clock. You have to burn timeout. Now, typically you don't have to do that twice, and then you take a delay of game penalty after a very telegraphed, hey, let's go out there and make a lot of noise and pat the lineman's helmet. And I think Josh did like a vaudeville, like roll the dice and kick at one point. And he was really like he was method acting. He was the Cillian Murphy of trying to draw people off sides in that moment, and it was fun to watch. But that was a tough thing because everybody in the world knew that they were just trying to get him to jump.
Well, and I would just love a more – this isn't Sunny specific. This is everybody. I would just love a moratorium, or I would love the new approach that teams have. If you're in 4th and 5 or less, absolutely go up there and try and get them to jump and get the free yardage. Absolutely. That's fine. What I need someone to explain to me why teams don't do that with an actual play in their back pocket. Try like twice to get the defense to jump. Check. All right, now we're actually running our play. And then we run what the sneak, the pitch, whatever it is. Like, because it's an egregious waste of a timeout when you take it. Now, a lot of folks, when they just take the delay of game, and that's fine, but it's a waste of everyone's time. But I just wish teams would be like, go up there with a plan and go up there with your backup plan. And your plan is, we have this motion or we have this hard count that we're going to try and get them. And then that doesn't work. That's great. We still believe in our offense to get 1 yard.
Well, it's also, and I promise everybody, I'm going to get positivity here in a second. We've spent like 10 minutes kind of getting to this, but, and I say this realizing that they actually got them to jump earlier in the game, and apparently Brockermeyer just neglected to snap the ball when Utah was in the neutral zone. But the hard count's also like 10 times more effective if you can actually get under center and do it, because you're barking out signals instead of just clapping and doing the check with me stuff and moving your leg. Like, you got to get up there and really go through the hard count, but they can't do that because they don't get under center much. So anyway, that's another discussion. All that being said, back to the original question that I asked you, I think they can get to 7 or 8 wins, but you either have to clean some of the stuff up, or you just have to execute better in other phases of the game. So yeah, I think there's a path to it, and I was impressed that they at least got out there and didn't just pack it in against the Utah team that seemed like maybe they kind of did. And they dominated the game from a stats perspective. But as you said, Matt, you got to score points to really put the game away, because it was a 1-possession game pretty much the entire second half.
Yeah, they need to convert the yards into points. I mean, that's the most simple way I can put it. Turn the yards into points, and all of this turns into a very different conversation. They haven't been doing that, certainly over the last 2 games in a big way. But I mean, they have the players who can do it.
But when you play good defenses, converting 3rd and 8 is a lot harder. It's easier to do that against UCF and, take your pick, Long Island or whoever. It's tougher when you're playing teams that can be physical and get after it. But that being said, we're on to Texas Tech. The battle for the saddle, baby. It's locked up. Go ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to say, you want to talk about things that make you feel different? You want to talk about things that make you feel different about this team? You go out and you win both of these next 2 games. And it kind of doesn't matter to me what the margin is. If you win handily and you control the game in either one of them, great. But these are the 2 games, especially with Texas now off the schedule and SMU coming off the schedule after next year. Like, these are the games that matter. These are the games that matter to TCU fans. It's Tech and Baylor. Win these 2 games, you win yourself some goodwill, and you feel a lot better. You got to win both.
Yep, Tech at home, and then Baylor apparently going to honor their 2013 and 2014 Big 12 championship teams at a night game blackout situation. So everybody get ready for that. With Kendall Browse on the opposing sideline. Life's weird, man. It's just weird, the twists and turns that everything takes. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast.